Now let's begin. I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary as I pulled into my father-in-law's driveway. The October sun was setting early, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn that Roland Hobbs maintained with the same meticulous precision he applied to everything in his life. Everything had its place in Roland's world. Everything followed his rules. I'd been thinking about Tommy all weekend. My son had been distant lately, quiet in ways that 8-year-old boys shouldn't be quiet. The kind of silence that felt heavy, loaded with words he couldn't or wouldn't say. Stacy had dismissed my concerns with that tight smile she'd perfected over our 10 years of marriage. The one that said I was overreacting, being paranoid, not trusting her judgment. He's just growing up, Chris, she'd said last night over dinner. He's spending time with his grandfather. It's good for him. I knocked on the front door. Roland answered, impeccable as always in his pressed khakis and polo shirt. At 63, he looked like he could still run the construction company he'd built from nothing, still had that presence that made people straighten their spines when he entered a room. Chris. He said my name like it was something distasteful on his tongue. Right on time. Where's Tommy? Guest room. Packing his things. Roland stepped aside, but his body language made it clear I wasn't particularly welcome. I'd never been good enough for his daughter. A high school history teacher didn't measure up to his standards. Stacy had inherited a trust fund that dwarfed my salary 5 times over, and Roland never let me forget it. I found Tommy sitting on the bed, his small backpack zipped and ready. He didn't look up when I entered. Hey, buddy. Ready to go? He nodded, grabbed his bag, and walked past me without making eye contact. That heavy silence followed us down the stairs, through the foyer where Stacy's mother Lori waved goodbye with forced cheerfulness, and out to my truck. Tommy climbed into the back seat instead of the front. He'd been riding shotgun for a year now, proud of being big enough. This felt wrong. I pulled out of the driveway, watching his face in the rearview mirror. He was staring out the window, jaw clenched in a way that reminded me of myself when I was holding back tears. Son, how was it? Dad, don't take me back there. The words came out flat, final. My heart stopped. What happened? Tommy's hands were shaking. He reached for the hem of his shirt, lifted it slowly. The bruises on his ribs were finger-shaped, dark purple against his pale skin. Some were fresh. Others had yellowed with age. The world tilted sideways. Grandpa does this when I'm alone. His voice cracked. But Dad, Mom drops me off every weekend. She knows. She says not to tell you anything. Dad, check the lock on their guest room. I pulled over so hard the tires squealed. My hands were shaking now too. Tommy, I need you to tell me everything. Right now. He did. Every word felt like a knife. The locked door at night. The punishments for small mistakes. The threats about what would happen if he told me. And Stacy, my wife, knew. Had known for months. Had been actively covering it up, coaching Tommy to hide it from me. I should have called the police right then. That's what a rational person would do. But I wasn't feeling rational. I was feeling something primal and cold and absolutely certain. Tommy, I need you to stay at Uncle Damon's house tonight. Can you do that for me? He nodded, wiping his eyes. Are you going back there? Yes. Dad, be careful. Grandpa, he's different when he's angry. I dropped Tommy at Damon Barry's apartment across town. Damon had been my best friend since college, the only person I trusted completely. He took one look at my face and asked no questions, just put his hand on Tommy's shoulder and promised to keep him safe. Then I drove back to Roland Hobbs's house. The front door was locked now. I didn't knock. I went around to the side gate, through the backyard, and tried the sliding glass door. Also locked. Good. That meant they thought I was gone. I picked up one of the decorative stones from Lori's garden and threw it through the glass. The alarm started shrieking immediately. I stepped through the broken door, ignoring the glass crunching under my boots. Roland appeared at the top of the stairs, face red with fury. What the hell do you think you're doing? The guest room, I said. Show me the lock. Something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Get out of my house. I started up the stairs. He moved to block me, but I was 30 years younger and running on pure adrenaline. I pushed past him, down the hallway. The guest room door looked normal from the outside, but when I tried the handle, it didn't move. This is a deadbolt, I said quietly. On the outside of a bedroom door, where my son sleeps. That's for security. Open it. I don't have to. I kicked the door. The frame splintered. I kicked it again, and it burst open. The room looked normal at first glance. twin bed with dinosaur sheets. Tommy's favorite stuffed bear on the pillow. Then I saw the camera mounted in the corner, lens pointed at the bed. The tripod folded in the closet. The locked box on the dresser. I turned to face Roland. He'd gone pale. "You recorded it," I said. "You actually recorded it." Lori had appeared in the hallway now, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Roland, what is he talking about?" I forced the lock on the dresser box with a letter opener from the desk. Inside were dozens of SD cards, each labeled with dates going back 3 years. 3 years of weekend visits. 3 years of my son being hurt while I was oblivious and his mother actively enabled it. "Lori," I said, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "Did you know?" She looked from me to Roland to the box of SD cards, and I saw the answer in her face before she spoke. She hadn't known. Roland had been operating in secret, even from his own wife. "Get out," she whispered to him. "Get out of this house right now." But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my phone and took photos of everything. The camera, the lock, the SD cards, the labels. Evidence. Because I was going to need it. Roland made a move toward the stairs. I blocked his path. "You're not going anywhere until the police get here. You can't prove anything." "I can prove everything." I held up my phone. "And Tommy's going to tell them exactly what you did." The sirens were getting closer. The alarm company must have called it in. Good. Let them come. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. I'd been sitting in an interview room for 2 hours, going over my statement again and again while Tommy was interviewed by specialists in another room. Damon had brought him in, stayed with him through the whole process. Detective Amelia Rangel had kind eyes, but a voice like steel. She'd seen too many cases like this, I could tell. Knew how to separate truth from lies, how to recognize the signs. "Mr. Matthews," she said, "I want to be clear about something. What you did tonight, breaking into that house, confronting Mr. Hobbs, you could face charges. I know. But given what we've found, given your son's testimony and the physical evidence." She paused. "The district attorney is willing to overlook your methods. This time, what happens now? Roland Hobbs is being held without bail. We're going through those SD cards. If they contain what we think they contain, he's looking at decades. And your wife." She glanced down at her notes. "Stacy Matthews. She's being charged as an accessory. Child endangerment at minimum." The words should have brought satisfaction. Instead, I just felt hollowed out. "Can I see my son?" "Soon. The doctors want to examine him first, document everything for the case." Detective Rangel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and frowned. "Excuse me a moment." She left the room. Through the small window in the door, I could see her talking intensely with another detective. Their body language was animated, urgent. When she came back, her expression had changed. "Mr. Matthews, I need to ask you something. Has your son ever mentioned other children being at your father-in-law's house?" My stomach dropped. "What did you find?" "The SD cards. There are other victims. At least 4 other children over the past 5 years." The room seemed to spin. This wasn't just about Tommy. Roland had been doing this systematically, methodically, and Stacy had known, or at least suspected, and done nothing. "We're going to need you to look at something," Detective Rangel said, "to see if you recognize any patterns, any names Tommy might have mentioned." She pulled out a tablet, showed me lists of dates and files. My teacher brain kicked in automatically, organizing information, finding connections. And then I saw it. "These dates," I said, pointing. "They're all weekends when Stacy insisted Tommy stay overnight. She kept a calendar on our fridge, marked them as family time. I thought she was just being controlling about her parents getting time with him. She was scheduling the abuse," Detective Rangel said quietly. "We'll need that calendar." I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face our house, our bedroom, the life that had been built on lies. Instead, I checked into a motel near the police station and lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every weekend. Every time Stacy had insisted, every time I'd let my son go without question. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "You just destroyed our family. I hope you're satisfied." Stacy. She'd been released on bail. Her father's company had deep pockets, and she'd hired a lawyer within hours of her arrest. Of course she had. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to her. At dawn, I drove to Damon's apartment. He answered the door looking exhausted, gestured me inside. Tommy was asleep on the couch, curled around his stuffed bear. He talked until midnight, Damon said quietly. About everything. Chris, it's worse than you thought. I know. The police told me. Not just that. Damon handed me a piece of paper covered in Tommy's careful handwriting. He wrote this down. Names. Other kids from his school, from the neighborhood. Roland had a whole network. I read the list. Recognized 3 of the names immediately. Kids from Tommy's class, from the baseball team I coached. Their parents had trusted Roland just like I had. He was the successful businessman, the pillar of the community, the grandfather who sponsored little league teams and donated to the school. I'm going to destroy him, I said. The police are handling it. The police can't do what needs to be done. I looked at my best friend. Roland has money, connections. He'll hire the best lawyers, drag this out for years. The kids will have to testify, be traumatized all over again. And Stacy, she'll probably get a plea deal, walk away with probation. So what are you thinking? I'm thinking the legal system isn't enough. I'm thinking people like Roland understand power and reputation. And I'm thinking I know how to take both away from him. Damon studied my face. What do you need? Your tech skills. And your willingness to look the other way. He nodded slowly. Whatever you need. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not hard to do. The principal had heard about my family emergency through the small-town gossip mill and told me to take all the time I needed. Then I started making calls. First, to a private investigator named Miguel Jacobs that Damon had recommended. Miguel was ex-FBI, ran a small firm that specialized in financial crimes. Within an hour, he was sitting across from me in a coffee shop, listening to my story. You want me to dig into Roland Hobbs's business, he said when I finished. Find leverage. Find everything. His company, his finances, his connections. He's been operating for years. There has to be more than just this. Men like him don't stop at one crime. Miguel made some notes on his phone. This isn't cheap. I don't care. Name your price. He quoted a number that would drain most of my savings. I didn't hesitate. Do it. Give me a week. Maybe less. While Miguel worked his angle, I pursued mine. I went back to the house, my house, though it didn't feel like mine anymore, and gathered every document Stacy had ever left lying around. Bank statements, correspondence, her father's company financial reports that she'd brought home from visits. She'd never been particularly careful about security, and I'd never had a reason to look before. Now I looked at everything. Roland's construction company, Hobbs Building and Development, had done well over the years. But as I dug deeper, patterns emerged. Projects that went over budget mysteriously. Subcontractors that existed only on paper. City contracts awarded with suspicious timing. Nothing overtly illegal at first glance, but enough irregularities to raise questions if someone started asking them publicly. I photographed everything, uploaded it to an encrypted cloud drive that Damon had set up for me. Evidence. Ammunition. On the 3rd day, Stacy came to the house. I'd changed the locks, but she still had the audacity to knock on the door like she belonged there. We need to talk, she said when I opened it. No, we don't. Chris, please. You're making this worse than it has to be. Dad made mistakes, yes, but... Mistakes. The word came out like a gunshot. Your father systematically abused our son, and you knew. You enabled it. You scheduled it. Her face hardened. You can't prove I knew the extent. The police have your text messages. The ones where you told Tommy not to tell me. The ones where you coordinated drop-off times with your father. She flinched. My lawyer says those are circumstantial. Your lawyer is going to lose. My lawyer says you broke into my parents' house, destroyed property, and contaminated a crime scene. He says we can sue you for everything you're worth. She smiled, cold and sharp. Which isn't much, is it? I smiled back. Sue me. See what happens. She turned to leave, then paused. You're going to regret this. My family has resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you. Try it. I watched her drive away in her BMW, the one her father had bought her for her 30th birthday, and felt nothing but contempt. This was the woman I'd married, the one I'd built a life with, and she'd valued her father's approval more than our son's safety. Miguel called that afternoon. You need to see this. Can you meet me in an hour? Miguel's office was in a strip mall on the edge of town, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a tax preparation service. The interior was surprisingly sophisticated, multiple monitors, secure filing cabinets, a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and connections. Roland Hobbs is a piece of work, Miguel said, pulling up files on his main screen. On the surface, upstanding businessman. Underneath, he's been running a sophisticated kickback scheme for 15 years. He walked me through it. Roland would bid on city construction projects, win the contracts through connections on the city council, then inflate costs through ghost subcontractors, companies that existed only on paper, run by associates who funneled the money back to him. The projects got built, but at inflated costs, with the taxpayers footing the bill and Roland pocketing the difference. How much are we talking? Conservatively, $8 million over 15 years. Maybe more. Why hasn't anyone caught this? Because he's careful. The ghost companies are registered in different states. The money moves through multiple accounts. And the city officials getting kickbacks have no incentive to look too closely. Miguel pulled up another file. But here's where it gets interesting. One of those city officials? Judge Patrick Roberts. My blood went cold. The family court judge? The same one who'll likely oversee custody proceedings in your divorce. And who owes Roland Hobbs about $500,000 in under-the-table payments over the years. This was it. This was how Roland planned to win. Stacy would file for divorce, claim I was unstable, dangerous. Judge Roberts would give her custody, and everything would go back to the way it was. Except Tommy would never be safe again. Can you prove the connection? I asked. I can prove enough to make Roberts recuse himself. But if you want to really nail Roland, we need to go bigger. What do you have in mind? Miguel's smile was predatory. The FBI has been investigating municipal corruption in this county for 6 months. They just haven't found the right thread to pull. I think we should give it to them. Anonymously. That won't be enough. Roland will hire lawyers, drag it out. Which is why we don't just go to the FBI, Miguel interrupted. We go to the media too. All at once. Federal investigation, news stories, social media exposure. We make him radioactive before he can mount a defense. I thought about Tommy, about the other victims, about all the parents who trusted this man. Do it. There's one more thing, Miguel said. I found something else on those SD cards the police seized. Metadata showing they'd been uploaded to a cloud server. Roland was backing everything up remotely. Why would he do that? Insurance, maybe. Or distribution. The FBI's cybercrimes unit needs to know about this. It could be part of a larger network. The scope of it was staggering. This wasn't just one predator. It was a systematic operation, with Roland at the center. And he'd been so confident in his protection, his connections, his power that he'd gotten sloppy. That sloppiness would destroy him. I spent the next week being the perfect father. Took Tommy to his therapy appointments, sat with him when the nightmares came, helped him understand that none of this was his fault. Slowly, carefully, he started to come back to himself. The quiet, scared boy who'd sat in the back of my truck was transforming back into the kid who loved dinosaurs and baseball and terrible dad jokes. Dad? He asked one night while I was tucking him into bed at Damon's place. Is Grandpa going to jail? Yes. What about Mom? That was harder. I don't know yet, buddy. But you're never going back there. I promise. Good. He hugged his stuffed bear tighter. I was scared you wouldn't believe me. I will always believe you. Always. While Tommy healed, I executed the plan. Miguel delivered his evidence package to the FBI field office in the state capitol. Not to the local bureau. We couldn't risk anyone who might be in Roland's pocket. The media package went to 3 different investigative journalists, each with a reputation for taking down powerful people. And then we waited. The explosion came on a Wednesday morning. The local newspaper broke the story first. Prominent developer under federal investigation for fraud. Within hours, the larger outlets picked it up. By evening, the child abuse charges had surfaced, and Roland Hobbs's face was on every news channel in the state. His company's stock, it had gone public 5 years ago, plummeted. The city council held an emergency meeting and suspended all contracts with Hobbs Building and Development. Former associates scrambled to distance themselves, issuing statements about how they'd always had concerns and were shocked to learn the truth. Judge Roberts recused himself from all cases involving Roland or his family, citing potential conflicts of interest. A federal judge would oversee the criminal proceedings instead. That meant no hometown advantage, no friendly faces on the bench. Stacy called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Her lawyer issued a statement claiming she was a victim too, that she'd been manipulated by her father. The public wasn't buying it. Not when the police released excerpts from her text messages, the ones where she'd told Tommy to keep quiet, to be a good boy, to not make trouble. The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks out. In that time, the FBI's investigation bore fruit. They arrested 2 city council members and the former director of public works. They seized Roland's financial records and found exactly what Miguel had predicted: years of fraud, millions in stolen money, a network of corruption that had infected the city government like a disease. Roland's lawyers tried to get the child abuse charges separated from the financial crimes. The federal prosecutor refused. These cases are intrinsically linked, she argued. Mr. Hobbs used his position of power and influence to shield himself while preying on children. The financial crimes enabled the sexual abuse. They will be tried together. 3 days before the hearing, I got a call from Detective Rangel. Mr. Matthews, we've identified 2 more victims. Older cases, but the statute of limitations hasn't run out. And one of them is willing to testify. Who? I can't give you names, but one of them is now a prosecutor. In another state. She's been waiting years for this chance. Justice was a slow-moving machine, but once it started rolling, it was unstoppable. I felt something loosen in my chest. Hope, maybe. Or vindication. The night before the hearing, I sat down with Tommy at Damon's kitchen table. He was doing better, smiling more, sleeping through the night. But I knew the hearing would be hard on him, even though his testimony had already been recorded and he wouldn't have to appear in person. Tomorrow, they're going to talk about what Grandpa did, I said. You don't have to watch it on TV or read about it. You can just be a kid. Will they believe me? Everyone believes you. Everyone knows you're telling the truth. What about Mom? I'd been dreading this question. Your mom made bad choices. She put Grandpa's feelings ahead of your safety. That was wrong. Does she love me? I think she loves the idea of you. But she doesn't know how to love you the way you deserve. I took his hand. But I do. And so does Uncle Damon. And so do a lot of other people who are making sure you're safe now. He nodded, processing this with the solemn seriousness of a child who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Can I keep living here with you and Uncle Damon? For now? But soon, we're going to get our own place. Just you and me. Maybe a house with a backyard, so we can get that dog you've been asking for. His face lit up. Really? Really? The courthouse was surrounded by media trucks when I arrived. I'd hired my own lawyer, Christian Parker, a family law specialist with a reputation for winning custody battles against all odds. He met me on the steps, briefcase in hand. This is going to be ugly, he said. Stacy's team is going to argue that you're unstable, that you destroyed evidence, that you can't be trusted with Tommy. Can they win? Not after everything that's come out. But they'll try. He straightened his tie. Let's go make sure they fail. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Roland's lawyers argued that the charges were overblown, that he was a respected businessman being railroaded by an overzealous prosecutor. The federal prosecutor systematically demolished every argument, presenting evidence of fraud, abuse, and a pattern of predatory behavior that spanned decades. Stacy's lawyers argued that she'd been deceived, that she hadn't known the full extent of her father's crimes. Then the prosecutor played the text messages. Stacy's voice, recorded from her phone. Don't tell your father. He wouldn't understand. Grandpa is just strict, that's all. You need to be tougher. Another text. I'm dropping Tommy off at 5. Dad wants the weekend. Make sure he's well behaved this time. And the damning one. I know he's scared, but this is important for our family. Dad's helping us with the trust fund. We need to keep him happy. The courtroom went silent. Even Stacy's lawyers looked uncomfortable. The judge, a stern woman named Amelia Rangel's colleague, brought in from another district, shook her head in disgust. When it was my turn to testify, Christian walked me through everything. The discovery, the confrontation, the evidence I'd gathered. I kept my voice steady, professional. This was my moment to show who I was. Not an unstable vigilante, but a father who'd done what was necessary to protect his child. Mr. Matthews, Stacy's lawyer said during cross-examination, you broke into a private residence. You destroyed property. You contaminated a crime scene. Doesn't that show a pattern of reckless behavior? No, I said. It shows that when I discovered my son was being abused, I took immediate action to protect him and gather evidence. Vigilante justice. There was nothing vigilante about it. I called the police. I cooperated with investigators. I documented everything properly. What I didn't do was wait while my son suffered. The lawyer tried a different angle. You've been conducting your own investigation into Roland Hobbs's business dealings. That seems obsessive. It seems thorough, I corrected. Roland Hobbs is a dangerous man with extensive resources. He needed to be exposed completely, not just partially. Every victim deserves justice, not just my son. Christian was grinning when I stepped down from the stand. Perfect, he whispered. You came across exactly right. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Roland was denied bail, flight risk, and danger to the community. Stacy's bail was revoked after the text messages were presented. The judge cited her as an active danger to her child. Custody of Tommy was awarded to me, full and permanent, pending any future changes in circumstance. This court finds, the judge said, looking directly at Stacy, that Mrs. Matthews knowingly and willfully endangered her child. Her actions constitute not just negligence, but active complicity in abuse. Full custody is awarded to Mr. Chris Matthews. Stacy's face crumpled. She tried to make eye contact with me, mouth-forming words, please, or sorry, or something else I couldn't hear and didn't care about. I looked away. The trial took 3 months to start. In that time, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Tommy and I moved into a small house on the outskirts of town, 3 bedrooms, a fenced yard, and a rescue dog named Bear who slept at the foot of Tommy's bed every night. I returned to teaching, my colleagues and students welcoming me back with understanding and support. The divorce papers came through quickly. Stacy didn't contest anything. She was too busy trying to avoid prison time. Christian negotiated a settlement that gave me everything: the house, custody, and a restraining order that kept Stacy at least 500 feet from Tommy at all times. Roland's trial was a media circus. The prosecutor brought in victim after victim. Children who were adults now, who'd been living with the trauma for years. Tommy's recorded testimony played on screens throughout the courtroom, his small voice describing what had been done to him. The defense crumbled. Roland's lawyers tried to argue diminished capacity, claiming their client had mental health issues. The prosecutor brought in forensic psychologists who testified that Roland was fully aware of his actions and had taken deliberate steps to avoid detection. The financial crimes added years to his potential sentence. The ghost companies, the kickbacks, the tax fraud, all of it came out in meticulous detail. Miguel testified as an expert witness, walking the jury through the paper trail that proved Roland's guilt beyond any doubt. On the 43rd day of the trial, the jury returned their verdict, guilty on all counts. 47 charges of child abuse, 12 counts of fraud, 8 counts of racketeering, and multiple counts of possession and distribution of child exploitation material. The judge sentenced him to 156 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Roland's face showed no emotion as the sentence was read. But when the bailiffs let him out in shackles, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. Real, genuine fear. He was 73 years old. He would die in prison. Stacy's trial came next. With her father already convicted, her defense collapsed. She took a plea deal: 15 years for child endangerment, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. With good behavior, she might get out in 10. I didn't attend her sentencing. Neither did Tommy. We were at home, building a treehouse in the backyard, doing the things fathers and sons should do. The FBI investigation expanded beyond Roland. They found connections to other predators, other networks, other children who'd been hurt. It became a multi-state operation, leading to dozens of arrests. The prosecutor who'd volunteered to testify, the woman who'd been one of Roland's early victims, led the charge, bringing down the entire network. Judge Patrick Roberts was indicted on corruption charges. The city council members went to prison. The whole rotten system that had protected Roland Hobbs was torn down and exposed. I'd started it all with one act of desperate protection, but it had grown into something larger than I could have imagined. Justice, real justice, had been served. 6 months after Roland's conviction, I sat in my backyard watching Tommy play with Bear. He was laughing, really laughing, chasing the dog around the yard with pure, uncomplicated joy. The nightmares had stopped. The therapy was working. He was going to be okay. Damon came over with pizza and beer, settled into the lawn chair next to mine. "You did good, man," he said. "We did good," I corrected. "Couldn't have done it without you. What are you going to do now? I mean, really do? You've won everything. Roland's in prison forever. Stacy's locked up. Tommy's safe. What comes next?" I thought about it. The anger that had driven me for months had burned itself out, replaced by something quieter, but more permanent, purpose. I'm going to keep teaching, I said. I'm going to raise my son, and I'm going to make sure this never happens to another family. How? I've been talking to some of the other victims' families. We're starting a foundation, education, awareness, support for families who've been through this. Miguel's coming on as a consultant, helping us identify warning signs and protect kids. That's good. That's really good. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set. Tommy came running over, breathless and happy. Dad, Uncle Damon, Bear learned a new trick. Show us, I said. He demonstrated Bear's ability to play dead on command, and we applauded like it was the greatest performance we'd ever seen. Because in a way, it was Tommy being a kid again, being safe, being loved the way he deserved. Later that night, after Damon went home and Tommy was asleep, I sat in my home office and pulled up the file folder labeled Aftermath. Inside were newspaper clippings, court documents, and letters from other victims thanking me for having the courage to act. One letter stood out, from the prosecutor who'd testified. You saved my soul when you saved your son. I've spent 20 years trying to find a way to make Roland pay, and you gave me that chance. Thank you for being brave enough to do what needed to be done. I filed it carefully with the others. These were reminders, not trophies. Reminders that one person acting with courage and purpose could change everything. That evil might be powerful, but it wasn't invincible. That justice, real justice, was possible if you were willing to fight for it. My phone buzzed. A text from Tommy's therapist. Great session today. He's making remarkable progress. You should be very proud. I was. Proud of him, proud of what we'd survived, proud of the life we were building together. Roland Hobbs had thought he was untouchable, protected by money and connections and fear. Stacy had thought she could choose her father's approval over her son's safety without consequences. They'd both been wrong. And every night, when I tucked Tommy into bed and listened to him talk about his day, about school, about friends, about the treehouse we were building, I knew we'd won. Not just in court, not just in the legal sense. We'd won the war that mattered. The war for my son's future, his happiness, his right to be a kid without fear. That was the victory I'd fought for. That was the victory I'd earned. And no one could ever take it away from us again. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.